The video games industry is a mess. Think about it. On one side, you have companies that are buying other companies as they try to become monopolies, while at the same time, they're trying to extract as much money as possible from consumers and gamers through loot boxes, NFTs, devious monetization practices, whatever. But on the other side, you have all these historical scandals and workers in the video games industry who actually make the games, fighting for their rights as individuals and employees. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So one has to ask, with all of that going on, how the hell do they make so much money? Hi, I'm Rob, and welcome to Gossip News, the show where we take the meat of video game news, pick out the choicest cuts, and leave the rest for others to turn into sausage. Food puns aside, we're going to get right into things with an editorial that's been posted in gamesindustry.biz back in July by Big Games Machine's director James Kay. And it's called, "If Indie Games Are Underreported, Mobile Games Must Be Invisible." Now, before we get into this, I will link this in the description below so you can have a read of it. For people like me who are interested in the business side of the video games industry, this editorial is an interesting piece to read because there are some aspects that I wasn't aware of, there were some aspects that gave me clarification, there were some aspects that I disagreed with, even though I understood the position that James Kay was making. The main gist of this editorial is that the video games press ignores indie games unless they're of a certain stature, even more so mobile games unless they're of the level of something like Diablo Immortal, which James Kay does reference specifically. Quoting directly from the editorial itself, "It's a shame mainly when negative headlines surround a major release such as Diablo Immortal. It gives the impression the entire industry lacks substance and is nothing more than a giant pool of microtransactions. That couldn't be further from the truth, especially with Diablo Immortal, which you can sink 40 hours and complete without having to spend a single penny. With the added bonus that it's also an excellent game, surely that's good value for money." Now, I'm not going to read any more of the editorial. I do think that it's worth reading for yourself. But it does lead us into our first news story, which is that Diablo Immortal has surpassed $100 million in revenue within just 2 months. Now, this is information that comes to us from Sensor Tower. Diablo Immortal ranks number 13 for mobile player spending since its launch on the App Store and Google Play Store on the 1st of June 2022. Just to put that into comparison, it's taken just 8 weeks for it to reach $100 million. Pokemon Go took 2 weeks. Fire Emblem Heroes took 10 weeks. Fortnite took 12 weeks. And Final Fantasy XV A New Empire took 22 weeks to reach $100 million. One thing that you have to remember is that this is a free-to-play game. So how the hell has it made $100 million? Well, think about what was in James Kay's editorial. You can play for 40 hours without spending a penny. It doesn't make sense, does it? How does a game where you can spend 40 hours without spending a penny make $100 million in just 2 months? There are some reasons for that, but before we go into those reasons, one thing that was tweeted out on Diablo Immortal's official Twitter page was that the game has reached 30 million installs. Now, part of that is going to be thanks to the launch in China on the 25th of July, but notice that they only talk about 30 million installs. They don't talk about how many people are actually playing the game, because a lot of people have quit playing the game after the 40 hours of free play time. Which again brings us back to that question, how does a game make $100 million when you have the first 40 hours for free? The answer lies in something that Mike Ibarra said a while ago when he was talking about Diablo Immortal, and he was basically defending the monetization practices in the game. He said that there's all this content at the beginning that you get for free, but then you have to pay for stuff to basically play through the end game. And this is where things get a little bit dicey. The amount of money, it was estimated, to get a character to max level was over $100,000, and we now have proof that that is the case, because we did have certain streamers like Rich Campbell and Quinn69 and Asmongold and other people like that who poured thousands of dollars into Diablo Immortal. We have some definite numbers from Rich Campbell and Quinn69 because they were on a recent episode of Allcraft along with Josh Strife Hayes. Quinn69 spent $25,000, it's well documented, on getting a specific type of gem from Diablo Immortal to prove that you could get it, and then quit the game, which basically means he pissed away $25,000 at a time when people are struggling under enormous financial pressures. But he's not the worst offender, because there is a content creator called JT Is All Business. And he released a YouTube video where he talks about the fact that he spent $100,000 on Diablo Immortal to get his character to max level. Unfortunately, he's now spitting his dummy out because nobody else spent that much money on the game, and so now there are certain things that he needs to do for his clan to retain their immortal status, which he can't do because he can't engage in PvP, or Battlegrounds as it's called in the game, because there's nobody else as strong as him. And if he can't do these things, then his clan of around 300 people will lose immortal status. Before we go into whether it was the right decision to spend that much money or not, let's have a look at some numbers. He spent $100,000. His clan apparently have spent at least $5,000 each on bringing their characters up to certain standards, and it's around 300 people. That's another $150,000. That's $250,000 or around there just from one group of players, and Diablo Immortal has, remember, 30 million installs, so we can assume there's going to be 25 million players. But remember, the first 40 hours are free, so what's the deal with that? Here's the cunning part of this whole scenario, and the reason why the really dodgy monetization practices of Diablo Immortal have worked so successfully. By playing the game for 40 hours, you effectively become addicted to the game. You play it daily, you want to continue, and so you will do things like paying for certain microtransactions to play the game. Now, as we've seen from some of those seminars that have been posted on YouTube and other places when they talk about monetization in video games, they have some really disgusting psychological practices that they use to get you spending more money. And the first one is that first spend, that first step, which games like Diablo Immortal rely on. And they do that by getting you invested in the game first, by letting you play for free first. Now do you begin to understand how Diablo Immortal can make $100 million in just 2 months? Now, back to JT Is All Business. In his YouTube video, he does comment on the fact that he has talked to Blizzard about this, they're not sure what to do. He's queued for PvP for between 48 and 72 hours, and nothing has happened, and this has been going on for around 6 weeks, 7 weeks. In that video, he talks to somebody who's on his stream, who seems to be a friend of his, about getting a refund. He asks the audience, should he get a refund? And as an audience member, I would like to say, good luck with that, mate, because I don't think you're getting anything. You've invested $100,000, which, to my mind, you're basically pissed away, into a game, and now you're spitting your dummy out because nobody else has done the same thing as you. Now, you could go to your bank and say, I want this money returned to my account. The bank will get in touch with Blizzard, and Blizzard will turn around and say, no. And you could get a lawyer, but I guarantee you, Activision Blizzard's lawyers are better than yours. And then you could basically try and drum up some public support, which most people won't give you because nobody wants to spend $100,000 on a stupid mobile game. And I know for a fact that Blizzard isn't going to give you that money back. Maybe they'll give you some token, a small amount, a percentage or something like that. But that'll be a sop, nothing more. But you ain't getting that $100,000 back, no way, no how. Because, number one, you're a fully grown man who's able to make his own decisions. Number two, it's not Blizzard's fault that no one else spent $100,000 on their game. And number three, Blizzard didn't force you to spend that money. Putting to one side the fact that people are pissing away so much money during these difficult times for so many people, we're going to talk about the new Newzoo report on the global video games market for 2022. It covers figures up to now and predictions for the rest of the year. And it's really interesting to the point where I may actually do an episode of The Big Slice on just this report. But there are certain aspects of it that relate directly to the mobile games market, which we have been talking about. And one of those is that in 2022, the video games market is predicted to reach $196.8 billion, which is a growth of 2.1% year on year. And of that, just $52.9 billion is from console games and $38.1 billion is from PC games. 2.3 billion is from browser-based games, but a massive $103.5 billion is from mobile games. Which is confusing to me because in that editorial by James Kay, he says that mobile games are virtually invisible. But if they're invisible, how are they making so much money? The two don't mesh until you start looking at the global market and you start considering where the majority of players are and where the growth is. According to the figures, there are a total of 3.198 billion people playing video games. That's a growth of 4.6% year on year. And when you consider that there are just over 7 billion people on the planet, almost half the planet plays video games. So anyone who says that video games are a niche pastime obviously hasn't been keeping up with current events. Anyway, of that 3.198 billion, only 219 million players live in North America. After that is Latin America with 315 million people. Europe is the third most populous region for gamers with 430 million, and then it's the Middle East and Africa with 488 million, which is surprising. But by a long margin, the Asia Pacific region has the most number of people playing video games, with 1.746 billion, which, if my maths are correct, is about the same number of people that live in China. Anyway, drilling down into the actual spending is even more interesting when you look at the spending by region. Of that $196.8 billion, $51.3 billion was spent in North America, and remember, North America has the least number of people playing video games. Latin America, which has more people playing video games, spent less than North America, with just $8.7 billion. Europe, which has the third highest number of people playing video games, spent $34.1 billion. The Middle East and Africa, which has the second highest number of people playing video games, 488 million, remember, spent just $7.1 billion on video games. But again, the Asia Pacific region, 1.746 billion people playing video games, spent a total of $95.6 billion. So what's the deal? Well, think about it. Mobile games are very, very popular in the East. China, Japan, Korea, mobile games are basically the king there. That's why the Switch has sold so well in those regions. That's why a lot of the phones that come out of the East are really good as gaming phones. Don't forget the meteoric rise of games like Genshin Impact. And so you have this market that consumes mobile games en masse almost. Yet here in the West, we don't have the same kind of viewpoint. And that's where I think the editorial from James Kay falls down a little bit, because it considers the Western viewpoint, but doesn't really consider the Eastern viewpoint. And the Eastern viewpoint is very, very different when it comes to video games as a whole. Let's give you an example. NFTs. We're all used to how Western developers and Western companies have pushed NFTs down our throats and tried to crowbar them into video games. We're all familiar with those goddamn monkeys. NFTs are things that we really don't want in their current form in video games. But, like it or not, companies want them in video games, they want to make money from them, and they will eventually get their way because they don't give a shit about people like you and me. So in that particular scenario, you have to find a compromise point, otherwise you don't make any progress. And that's where a company like Square Enix can enter the picture, because it wasn't that long ago that the president of Square Enix said that he wanted to use NFTs as a monetization thing within video games. He wanted to introduce them in a certain way within video games. And everybody criticized that decision. But recently, they've announced that they're selling a Final Fantasy figure that comes with an NFT. It's a figure of Cloud Strife, and it's not going to be available until November 2023. It's going to cost just under $130 for the figure only, but the Digital Plus edition, which gets you exchange tickets to redeem a digital certificate of authenticity and a digital version of the figure, both of which are held on the blockchain as NFTs, that's going to cost just under $160. People who buy the digital deluxe edition of this will have to register an account with an NFT platform called Engine and download the Engine Wallet app. But I'm not going to go into more specifics about that because that's not the interesting part about this. The interesting part about this is, number one, the fact that this has been announced so far in advance of when this is supposed to come out. And number 2, the fact that the NFT part is secondary to the actual figure. Now, unlike a lot of people, I didn't have an almost Pavlovian reaction to the letters NFT. Instead, I took a step back and thought about this a little bit before I decided this isn't actually a bad thing in terms of the global video games market. Now, allow me to explain why before you all spit your dummies out. The Western market, EA, Ubisoft, Activision Blizzard, you name it, they all have a specific approach when it comes to NFTs, and we've seen what that approach is. That's why we don't want them. But what Square Enix have done is a very tentative approach, almost as if they're asking gamers, is this something that you can live with? If we do NFTs like this, are you okay with that? Think about it. Why a year lead time for this? Why is it an optional thing? Why is it so cheap? $30 for an NFT. Not only that, on their pre-order site, they have a cautionary sign saying, look, before you buy this, you have to know this. Did any of the Western organizations or individuals who sold NFTs have that sort of information available before you bought? I think some of them might have, but not all of them did. And I think that's the fundamental thing that a lot of people need to do with what Square Enix have done. Compare it to how NFTs have been done in the West so far. Is Square Enix's approach better or worse? Is it something that you could look at as a potential compromise point? Now, staying on the subject of NFTs, Microsoft and Mojang have announced that they will not be allowing NFTs in Minecraft. They've released an article on the Minecraft website called Minecraft and NFTs, an early look at our upcoming guidelines, and in the article they detail what an NFT is, how it affects a player, and the policy on NFTs within Minecraft. One of the things that they state is their reasons for not allowing NFTs within Minecraft. Quoting directly from the article, some companies have recently launched NFT implementations that are associated with Minecraft world files and skin packs. Other examples of how NFTs and blockchain could be utilized with Minecraft include creating Minecraft collectible NFTs, allowing players to earn NFTs through activities performed on a server, or earning Minecraft NFT rewards for activities outside the game. Each of these uses of NFTs and other blockchain technologies creates digital ownership based on scarcity and exclusion, which does not align with Minecraft values of creative inclusion and playing together. NFTs are not inclusive of all our community and create a scenario of the haves and the have-nots. The speculative pricing and investment mentality around NFTs takes the focus away from playing the game and encourages profiteering, which we think is inconsistent with the long-term joy and success of our players. I totally agree. I applaud their decision because I have nephews and nieces who play Minecraft. I don't want them exposed to NFTs or anything like that in the game. And the fact that Minecraft is such a creative and imaginative place where people can basically build whatever they want, NFTs don't belong in a game like that. Now, it's obvious that not everybody is going to be happy with this decision from Mojang and Microsoft. One of them is an Unofficial Minecraft NFT platform who have said that they're now going to create their own game instead. The NFT platform in question is called NFT Worlds, and they describe themselves as a fully decentralized, fully customizable, community-driven, play-to-earn gaming platform where world owners can create their own limitless metaverse games or experiences for players or exclusive communities within their worlds, which is a lot of words strung together in what I assume is a sentence. Apparently, they are going to continue using the core mechanics of Minecraft as a base, but with the modernization and active development Minecraft has been missing for years, and they're going to create an entirely new type of 3D voxel-based decentralized gaming metaverse backed by the Ethereum blockchain. They believe it's not going to be a rewrite of some open source Minecraft clone, but I hate to say it, that's what it's going to look like to everybody. Leaving NFTs to one side, there's a study that's come out from Oxford University, which was in The Guardian, that says playing video games has no effect on well-being. Research into gameplay habits of 40,000 people counters fears that gaming could harm mental health. It's kind of a first step in an important field of research when it comes to video games, because mental health is a growing issue, it's a growing concern, and there is some evidence to suggest that video games can assist with the treatment of mental health issues. It's not going to cure them, but it can help. Just recently, the BBC had an article that was talking about how virtual reality can help with anxiety and how they were doing research into that. But this isn't related to that. This is related to a separate study that Oxford University have done. The 40,000 individuals basically had varying rates of time with playing video games, and their responses were measured based on how long they'd been playing for. The issue I've got with this particular bit of research, and I know it's just the first step, but the issue I've got is with some of the games. I have no problem with Animal Crossing New Horizons. I have no problem with Forza Horizon 4 or Gran Turismo. Apex Legends, Outriders, you could have gone with Call of Duty Mobile or something like that. Not a problem though. They're not my type of games, but I do understand people do play them. I do think you could have replaced The Crew 2 with something else because you've already got Forza Horizon 4 and Gran Turismo Sport, so you could have gone with another game. But what I don't understand is why they chose EVE Online as the MMO. It's not the one that I would say would yield the best results when it comes to a mental health study. I would say something like World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy XIV, something that has active player engagement. And I understand possibly why they went with EVE Online because it's a much smaller sample size. But again, EVE is one of those ones where it's classed as work, even though games like World of Warcraft eventually became more like work. But anyway, as I've said, it is just a first study. It is just a first step. So maybe they'll include other games like those that I've mentioned in future studies. It would be interesting to see just how different the results would be. Moving on to Sony, who have a bit of a problem with Xbox buying Activision Blizzard. Something that happens when you have a big company trying to buy a big company is that it goes through all these regulators around the world, and those regulators decide whether this is going to create a monopoly or not. In the case of Brazil, they have a thing that is enshrined in law where the government has to publish all documents related to everything. And because of this transparency and the translation skills of Video Games Chronicle, we can have a snapshot of what Sony actually think about the Activision Blizzard deal with Microsoft. And what they think is that they're not happy because they believe that Xbox owning Call of Duty could influence users' console choices. This is one of those occasions where it seems like a big video games company is belittling the actual players because the days of influencing console choices through an actual game are long gone. People like to say that Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4 was a console seller. It wasn't. I did not buy a console based on Spider-Man. I don't buy any consoles based on any games. I buy them because I want that console. Simple. And that's how a lot of people actually work now. I know nobody in the thousands of people I know who play video games. I know nobody who bought a PlayStation 4 to play God of War or Spider-Man or any other game. They bought them because they wanted a PlayStation 4. That was it. Just like they bought an Xbox Series X because they wanted one, or a PlayStation 5 because they wanted one, or a PC because they wanted one. So saying something like Call of Duty is going to affect how people buy consoles is irrelevant. It's no longer the case. Moving on to some things that have been delayed. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, the remake, has been delayed indefinitely according to Jason Schreier, who is usually a good barometer of how things stand within the video games industry. That is because of a shake-up at Aspyr Media, the Texas-based developer, who just last month fired the game's art director and design director. And in a series of meetings throughout July, Aspyr's 2 studio heads told employees that the project was on pause and that the company will look for new contracts and development opportunities, which basically means they're not going to be working on it anymore. Which is a shame. I was really looking forward to playing a new version of Knights of the Old Republic. On the other hand, another game that I really didn't care about but has been delayed anyway is Lord of the Rings Gollum, which, to be honest, from the footage that they've shown, really needed a delay, and they haven't actually said how long it's going to be, but I would estimate at least a year. I think they need to do a lot more work on it. Let me put it this way. I played Styx on the PC, which is a goblin stealth game, and it looks so much better than the current footage of Gollum. Moving on to an actual interesting story from the indie publishing side of things. Opera and GameMaker have launched a free mobile web games publishing platform called GX.games, which enables developers to bring games to iOS and Android via browsers at no additional cost. Now, this is something that Opera and Yo-Yo Games, who make the GameMaker engine, have launched together. They've added new functionality to GX.games and also to the Opera GX browser, which is going to be distributing titles from GX.games. The Opera GX browser is actually one of the better browsers to use on mobile devices anyway. So this is kind of a win-win situation for indie developers who want to put their stuff onto Android and iOS, because it goes around the App Store and the Play Store, and I am all for that. I am all for breaking the monopoly of these devices. Moving on to our penultimate story, which has to do with the MTV Video and Music Awards. One of the things that kind of stuck out was that this year was the first year that they had a category called Best Metaverse Performance. And the nominations for that were Blackpink, the Virtual, in PUBG, BTS in Minecraft, Charlie XCX, I have no idea who that is, in Roblox, Justin Bieber, an interactive virtual experience, Rift Tour featuring Ariana Grande in Fortnite, and 21 Pilots concert experience in Roblox. Now, I am all for different types of media interacting and creating something new, but I think that the MTV Awards, they need to really focus on who is actually getting the award. Is it the artist and the band, or is it the actual people who made it happen? You know, the developers, the server technicians, the engineers. They're the ones who kept everything afloat and stopped everything catching fire. Maybe give them a little bit of a nod? Maybe acknowledge their existence? Anyway, our final story is a bit of a feel-good piece because it focuses on a niche area of gaming that I didn't know existed until I read this article in Polygon. And it's about the Classic Tetris World Championship, which started in 2010 and still continues even now. A group of people kept the Classic Tetris World Championship alive, in particular Jonas Neubauer, who sadly passed away in 2021. But what I loved about this article was that it showed a changing of the guard. It showed how younger people, teenagers even, were coming into this world of competitive classic Tetris, and they were being welcomed by the old guard who really just wanted new people to come and play the game that they loved. And I think it's fantastic. It's well worth a read. I'm not going to dwell too much on it because it's something that you should read yourself. It's a very feel-good piece. I'm linking it in the description below. I had a smile on my face while I was reading this because it's one of those stories that makes you feel like video games are actually worth it. So, leaving on that odd note of positivity, let me know what you thought about all of the stories in the comments below. I am always interested in hearing what people think. I'll be back on the next episode of Gossip News or on The Big Slice, whichever comes first. Until then, thanks for watching.